Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 100 GP Pearl Economics and Trade as Design Elements. My name is Jason Pitre at Genesis of Legend Publishing. And to my left is Ken.
Depending on where the screen is, sure.
I am looking at the screen. To my left is
I'm
Ken.
not to your left in literally any sense, but yes, absolutely. I'm Kenneth Hite. I'm a game designer. I think that probably the last thing I did that was fundamentally about economics and trade was one of the Star Trek role-playing games that I did for Decipher. But in the interim, I've also written Trail of Cthulhu, Knights Black Agents, and Fall of Delta Green, as well as, I guess, most recently, I wrote the price tables for Haunted West by the lovely and talented Chris Spivey. I got to go dig around and find out about how horse flu and the Comstock load changed prices in the American West, and then ignore them because Chris did not want me to talk about them in any great detail. But that was good fun. Above me, in every sense, is the actual reason this panel is going to exist is Emily Dresner, the great, the mighty, the powerful.
Above and to the right of you, it's Twitch. Everything's broken.
Whoa, this is getting weird. Hey, hi, my name is Emily Dresner. I am the co-author of Swords of the Serpentine from Pelgrane Press with Kevin Culp, who is watching this. Hi, Kevin. Hi. I also write the Dungeonomics column for Critical Hits, which hopefully I'll go back to writing after the pandemic ends. And I've written a whole bunch of other junk in my past, which I'm going to admit I don't remember what it is, but there's a bunch of stuff. And actually, strangely, like in this corner, which is that right, is Rob.
This is the worst game of Family Feud ever. All right. I'm Rob Donoghue.
Tesseract.
Yes. Duh, look, we made the shape. I'm Rob Donoghue, co-founder of Evil Hat, sometime writer for them and some other stuff. Mostly I'm here because I read weird news articles, get ideas, and then write egregiously long Twitter threads about them. This is not a healthy hobby, but it is mine. And as with Ken, I'm mostly here to watch Em because she's a dangerous machine.
So before we get started, I'd like to quickly talk about food.
Yes, let's talk about food.
Food in Duskfall.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm never going to live that thread down.
Nope. So, Rob, what do they eat
Good.
in Blaze in the Dark?
Oh, well, what do they eat? They eat eels right off the bat because we know they've got eels, and everyone knows eels are delicious. And importantly, eels are like one of the things that show up a lot in Dishonored because jelly eels shows up in cans all the time, and that is such a disgusting thought that it is absolutely a good mesh. The problem is you can't just live on eels alone. You got to have some vegetation, and they got the electric lights and stuff that grows things for rich people. But the problem is that's only so much food. There's only so many calories. People need a lot of food to get through the day. So what grows well in the dark? Well, fungus grows well in the dark.
That's right. Yep.
Oh boy! All right, fungus plus blades in the dark. Nothing terrible could come from that. Now, okay, fungus needs a lot of organic material to grow on. Where do we have a lot? Oh, it's like we're harvesting giant creatures for barrels and tankers full of their blood, which we then distill into energy. Huh? I bet the waste product for that is a fantastic organic source material for growing mushrooms on. And I'll leave the rest of it as an exercise to the reader. But let's just say that is an excellent source of food that you don't want to think about.
Can I be the guy who corners the market on that particular fertilizer and then basically charges rents on desk?
No, nope. You get to be the beekeeper.
I get to be the beekeeper
because nobody is more badass than a beekeeper in Duskfall. Think about what is involved in keeping plants pollinated in that kind of environment.
I'm fairly certain that it's bats instead of bees.
Sure. Either way, maybe both.
It could be both. Maybe they're competing on
stinging
different
bats.
sizes.
I think they're stinging
Right.
bats.
Yeah, they're stinging bats. They're totally stinging bats. By the way, I am totally going to bring the innovation of demon whale blood pudding.
Yes.
Because you know that's going to be very popular.
It's hearty and comes in a can.
I'm just a traveling merchant man with a pack of vitamin A supplements.
That's right.
Maybe your city would not like to have pellagra. I don't know. I'm just a guy with vitamin A supplements.
And that is how you rule Duskfall.
Yep.
So the reason why I wanted to bring this up is we have just created a city that would literally kill for a box of slightly moldy strawberries and some wilted lettuce.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, the vitamin C component is and numerous things like that is just hard. But that is the joy of magic.
Yep.
You can hand wave a lot of things. I think that blood mushrooms are probably nutritionally complete.
Are
Grow
they?
big and strong and extra limbs.
People thought that about corn before they discovered, everyone's got pellagra.
It always gets back to my thinking about what do people eat in the Underdark, right? So we got a bunch of elves that live in the Underdark, and
Well,
they
elves live on
cities.
rainwater and lembus anyway.
Right.
They don't have the same nutritional requirements that
Yeah,
people
but
do.
what
Also,
about, like,
flumps are very nutritious.
Flumps are very nutritious. Do we have like a nutritional thing that writes out what is in the flump?
If we don't, check DM's guild in about 6 hours.
Well, I mean, flumps do eat emotions,
Which are
Oh,
abundant.
which are a renewable
And free.
resource.
It's like a
Underdark.
that's free.
However, we are
That's
now
right.
getting into Jason's pet project of ecology. So we're going to slide this back to money and offer a brief explanation for anyone who does not know why we have the title, the 100 GP Pearl. And that is 100% to Emily's credit. She wrote a magnificent piece that was an analysis of the impact of the identify spell on D&D. And with that setup, I'm just going to hand the baton to Emily so she can tell us how this works.
So I'm gonna walk. I need to take a short step backwards before I can start walking forward to explain exactly how this works. Which, by the way, many people pointed out to me that this is not broken in 5e. So I will tell everybody who watches this Twitch, I know it's not broken in 5e. That said, it was a pretty good thought experiment. So if we walk back, then we start thinking about, right, economics. Economics is we think about economics as money, but it's not about money. It's about how people, organizations, and governments produce, consume, and allocate resources, right? So what resources that we have, how we use them, how we spend them, and we talk about, right, when we have the resources, what the incentives are around those resources, what are the uncertainty and risk about getting those resources, right? How do we game out getting those resources? So, and there's two different kinds of economics that we can think about, right? There's microeconomics, which is how individuals deal with those resources. And there's macroeconomics, or how entire societies deal with those resources. And what I find super fun about thinking about this, as I'm a systems person, I'm a systems thinker, I think in systems. So I like designing systems that have like this coherent like mesh around them, and then figuring out how to destroy them utterly. And in this case, this was a destruction. So the 100 gold piece pearl had actually bugged me for a while. It's the old D&D 3rd edition rules. If you look at it, it says that if you have a first level identify spell, every time you cast a spell, it consumes 100 gold piece. 100 gold piece pearl. Okay, so you have to have 100 gold pieces to have the pearl to identify every time. We know that adventurers find a large number of unidentified items. It's a very easy to get spell. But the question is, all right, we can get the 100 gold pieces to be able to buy the pearls, to be able to identify the items, but where does the pearls come from? So we have to start thinking about, all right, if we start modeling out, like how many adventures, and then on an adventure, how many magical items need to be identified per adventure? Plus, is that a stable resource that you would find in any adventuring town that would be sitting outside of the hellmouth of some adventure? And then where do those pearls actually come from to be able to stock those booths that the adventurers are coming to be able to get their items identified? So that started with a trade network of those pearls have to come from somewhere in some large quantity to be able to support that continuing adventure community. So they had to come from somewhere. Well, pearls are found in oysters in the ocean, but So we could think that if you have free divers that are selling pearls into this system, into this trade network to get into the trade communities that can go out to the booths that supply the adventurers. But if there's a higher and higher and higher number of adventurers, there's more and more pressures on the system. This is why we talk about economics is around resources. It's not just around money. So if we start actually putting pressure on the supply of those pearls, but we start guaranteeing that they're basically price fixed at 100 gold pieces. So we don't have any price fixing. The prices don't float. So that means that we have to enter more and more pearls into the system, which means that now we are incentivizing people to go off and figure out ways that they can get more and more pearls, which starts to enter scab pearls into the system. How many of those pearls are good? How many of them are bad? How do we know? So we have entire networks of basically press gaining people into going and diving for pearls. And then, well, who's diving for it? Well, it's sea people. So now we're going to enslave sea people to go and dive for pearls so that they can get them and put them into the system, that they can go into these trade networks, that they can go to the booths so the adventurers can get their swords identified, which very slowly but enslaves an entire race and starts to deplete the entire oceans of all pearls everywhere and all oysters anywhere. So if you ever wanted to eat anything that came out that any oysters that produce pearls, you weren't getting any in restaurants anytime soon. So, but I mean, we could have fixed the system by changing the 100 gold piece, but it's fixed in the rules. So,
hey, to be fair, they never said how big 100 GP pearl has to be.
True.
And once you get scarcity, the smallest of pearls is priceless.
That's right.
Also, what happens when after you enslave all of the sea people and the Songguan? That you secure all of their magic items, and now you have a surge of magic items coming into the market that need identification.
Oh, then you have a real problem, don't you?
Well, if you enslave the sea people, you can make them tell you what their magic items are. You don't need the pearls for that.
Yeah, but you killed them all.
No, you enslaved them. You can't kill them. They're there to get you pearls, Jason.
No, these are magic weapons. Magic weapons are in the hands of people who want to fight the people that are enslaving their people.
Much like ecology, the true purpose of economics in games is to take small problems and turn them into huge problems.
That's right.
Yep.
So yes. So and figure out a way to inject crime into those problems. That's pretty much the core thing that we're looking for here. Is not so much that we're trying to figure out a system and then figure out how to break the system. We're trying to figure out how to break the system in a way that is rampantly criminal. So in this particular thing with the pearls, we're trying to figure out, obviously, an illegal solution to the pearl scarcity problem by introducing slave sea people so that they don't have to pay the sea people and they can get the maximum amount of money of the pearls that they're selling into the system, which obviously is crime. And then maybe the adventurers go and kill all the slave drivers that are kidnapping all of the sea people. And then what happens to the whole pearl economy?
But clearly, Emily, something like this could never happen in the real world. We could never get a situation where economics lead to some kind of social injustice.
Nope.
Could you tell me about salt?
Oh yeah, I like talking about salt. So there's this thing called salt. Salt's one of my favorite things to talk about. You actually see in Everseek that I actually have a call out to salt. So I'm super obsessed with the history of food, especially the economic history of food, because it's a resource that we produce, consume, and allocate that everybody needs to have, every human must have in the world. And humans can't survive without salt. It's not just that we can't, we physically can't survive. If we don't have salt in our diets, we die. It's not just about preserving our food, but actually being able to eat it. But salt isn't distributed evenly throughout the entire world. It's found in salt flats and in salt mines and in particular pools around the world. So it's not everywhere. It's not even. And so it's for most of history, whoever controlled the salt controlled the world. Entire empires have risen and fallen. There's one episode with the Polish Empire, when Poland was still an empire, that was crippled by a lack of salt and nearly collapsed in the very early 19th century. Is a thing that has happened in recent memory. The reason that Venice is where it's at is not because of its facing east towards Byzantium or its good harbor, although it has a fantastic harbor, but because it's actually sitting on top of salt flats. And for 1,000 years, they did nothing but were the kings of salt in the Mediterranean. Terrible things that have happened over salt. There's a lot of terrible things that have happened over salt.
I was thinking of Gandhi to start.
Well, there's Gandhi. There's the entire history of England.
And the French Revolution.
The French Revolution.
By the way, a small tangent. Salt is also the only food product that we have that is not organic.
That's correct.
It is not certified organic.
Not true.
Okay.
There are some carbonates and some other things like that which we mine. Basically, there's a fantastic book called Twinkie Deconstructed that is literally a tour through the ingredients of a Twinkie. And if you want to find out about a couple other mineral foods that we eat.
Yeah, but there's very few.
Very few, yes.
And salt is one of them.
So
the three things that you can use to make any small problem worse: economics, ecology, and nutrition.
Yes.
Since economics is the field that governs the amount of access you have to the other two, economics therefore becomes the choke point.
That's right.
With enough money, you can solve your problems of nutrition or your problems of ecology. With no money, it almost doesn't matter.
Not quite. So let me tell you about the bats. This is a quick diversion into ecology.
Stop diverting into ecology, Jason. This is an economics panel.
They are intertwined.
Nope, you're
Anarchy,
too late.
my friend.
It's gone right into ecology.
Bats. Bats are in trouble. Do you know what economic function bats serve? Pollination.
Tourism in Austin, Texas.
That too. Also, they're delicious. Just saying. But if the bats
You're the guy
disappear,
that did it, then.
What can I say? If the bats disappear, then it's really hard for you to pollinate your crops. So now you have famine. Insert the entire economic problem, and you can't solve that with money because there's no more bats. They're all dead.
No, you totally can. Okay, you've got enough money. You can solve it for yourself.
If you have enough skilled necromancers,
I hate to break it to you, but poor people are delicious.
That is true. But that's how everything is intertwined.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And on the topic of food and things being intertwined, Exhibit B.
Yes, the maple syrup.
It is so
Maple
wrong
syrup.
that continues to exist in a can.
It's offending Rob. Rob
On a very, very primal level.
Yes, is not a place where maple syrup should be in a can.
No, a can is not a place of honor.
Hey, to be fair, this is grade A dark.
Which is good, especially because they also completely screwed up the naming scheme recently, and they're pretty much all lies now.
Yeah,
because you can't.
They meaning Canada, or they meaning Big Maple?
Big Maple.
Big Maple.
There's no longer a grade B. Everything is now just different descriptors on grade A, and nobody.
It's like condom sizes.
Yes. Disturbingly so. And now condoms full of maple syrup have entered my brain, and the things that can go from there are just, not good.
Now we have to figure out who wants them and who's trying to steal them.
But exactly but the reason that Jason holds it up there is because of one of the greatest crimes of recent history.
It is known as the maple syrup heist because Quebec is responsible for producing roughly 80% of the world's maple syrup supply. And I think it's like 15% Vermont and 5% New Brunswick. Or
New
something
Hampshire has some productions up, but yeah.
So they have a strategic maple syrup reserve. And some enterprising criminals broke in with a truck and stole millions of dollars worth of. they smuggled this maple syrup across the border to New Brunswick, where I believe they were planning on shipping it. I'm not sure if they were planning on shipping it to New Hampshire or shipping it overseas.
There were a lot of questions as to what their plan was for how they were going to turn it into money.
But
Yes.
they had very sticky
The
fingers.
questions arise whenever anyone enters New Brunswick. You have to say, "What were you doing?"
That's problem number one, right?
Right. Yeah.
So this means that we have legitimately had a major multi-million-dollar crime over maple syrup, which is literally tree squeezings.
Now, but this actually brings us to a really
Reheated tree
interesting question.
squeezings.
They are, but here's the thing. I think a lot of people hear that article or hear about that, and the first thing that jumps to their mind is like, why is there a maple syrup reserve?
Well, what if it runs out, Rob? What happens if the maple syrup runs out? What happens if the price of maple syrup goes to very high and none of us can put it on our waffles anymore? What happens to the world?
My goodness, are you suggesting that maybe there's some more complexity to goods getting around than them just getting put in boxes?
I would never suggest such a thing.
Or are you suggesting that by maintaining a reserve, you can control prices and leave them at a high enough level that the continued production of maple syrup becomes economical, given how ridiculously labor-intensive it is?
Wait, are you saying that control of a resource, is something that both has elements of power and money to it? I mean, that sounds like something someone might use in a game.
Hey,
I
man,
I mean, are you saying that there's variability in production of natural resources year after year, and this can lead to gluts or famines depending on local conditions?
hey, I'm telling you, man, price is just a signal wrapped in an incentive,
And I migrate this more concretely to something like Dungeons and Dragons.
That's right.
It strikes me that what are the kind of things that might be a reserve, might need reserves in Dungeons and Dragons? +1
Pearls.
swords.
Pearls!
Pearls, there you go.
You need third
Healing
edition.
potions.
Yes.
Sure.
What happens if there's a war that breaks out? You need to have enough healing potions in reserve.
Diamonds for resurrection spells.
Yep.
So where do the diamonds come from? How are they hoarded? How are they priced? Are they really going to be priced? What says that? Who controls that supply of diamonds? What if the bad guys control all the supplies of diamonds, and all they can do is they can raise all their people up every time you kill them. Every time your side dies, that Joey is dead. On the
I would actually like to give props to Baldur's Gate 1 for having an iron scarcity. And for specifically saying, dude, why can't we just make a wall of iron and then mine that? And the response being, do you want your sword to disappear with the Dispel Magic spell? Yes, I know that doesn't technically work, but that was a great explanation. That was chef kiss.
No, and it's good. And what that points to is actually something very important in games. We talk about economics and all that. This is all super complicated stuff. Like, get two economists in a room and get them to try to explain something, and then just tap the energy to heat the room for the rest of the year. But just explaining it enough to be interesting and nod things works fantastically well. Which is maybe a kind way of saying BSing works, and that econ is a good way to BS, but
no, econ is a good way to describe systems, right? It's a way to describe how people, because games are ultimately about people and how people interact with a world, given a framework of rules and a system, right? And it describes the incentives. So here's an example, right? Here's this really stupid D&D example that works really great. So we have a framework that is Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. We all sort of understand what that framework is, how it works, how we communicate. And there's this cave called the Cave of Near Certain Death, right? The Cave of Near Certain Death. It has a huge magic item in it that it will make us rich if we get it, and we'll get also, because it's a game and game design, one of the things that we'll get out of it is a super exciting fight and make us really powerful. But if we go in, but it's the Cave of Near Certain Death, right? So you have to start thinking about with the game party, what's the incentive versus what's the risk? Well, the incentive is to go get the big, the big magic item and have the cool fight. And the risk is your characters might all be TPK'd. So if you're thinking about it's game design, it's just how do we set up the frameworks and the incentives so that people have a lot of fun? Because at the end of the day, it's all about fun, right? We're all having fun. But I'll make it exciting, but also like be the economic driver to make them want to go into something called the Cave of Near Certain Death.
Also, to note, I'm the old man in the tavern offering you this quest as I take out life insurance on you adventurers who I have commissioned to go into the Cave of Near Certain Death.
Right.
See, the trick with that is no one's going to offer life insurance on adventurers. That's just the tables and they're terrible. But what you can do is fund them.
That's right.
And basically issue debt to let them get their magic items and whatnot, and then flip the debt.
Then we're going to securitize the debt.
Yeah,
of all
of the tranches.
All the tranches, and then we're going to get a bunch of investors to come and give us huge amounts of money. And all those investors happen to be dragons. So when all the adventurers get wiped out, then we can actually financially wipe out the dragons. And that's why they're pissed off, and that's why they're attacking us.
Well, until you discover that it is in fact the dragons who are issuing debt.
Oh yeah, of course.
Because dragons actually believe in secure paper, and that's the whole point behind the hoard thing.
That's right.
They are smart investors and very conservative in that way.
So this is
like pension funds.
They don't invest in paper. Paper is too flammable.
Yes.
Now, diamonds and pearls, however, those have increasing demand.
Pearls are also flammable, not to rain on your parade.
pearls are flammable? I didn't know pearls are flammable. Come back here.
Well, yeah, just letting you know. I guess
the more you know.
You opened a couple of boxes, Emily, and I think to maybe tangentially connect this to game design briefly before we go herring off on our next charming anecdote. We have two sort of overlapping concepts already, and then the third one was economics, like everything else that's sort of complex, makes great story hooks if you know literally half a minute about anything. But moving back from that, like you pointed out, Em, games themselves are economic systems. That the reward is fun, the incentive is the time you spend playing or engaging in the core activity, and that you, the designer, have to properly calibrate those incentives so that players, when they play your game, don't suffer a suboptimal result. And you have to make the rules both fluid enough that differing levels of investment can get differing levels of reward, but also unforgiving enough so that there's a genuine sense of engagement, as opposed to just, well, we came in and told everyone that everything was great and we left. I mean, that's not that games. Some games are like that, but if you want to make a game that has iterative playability, you don't want to design that way. So there's that level in which we talk about economics and game design. And then there's the level of within the game, how much of our core activity is economic activity. And that is, I think, a question that you ask both as the designer and as the player, because Traveler, for example, presumes that you are engaging, I think in the designer's mind, presume that you are engaging in economic activity as the excuse to have space adventures. Whereas very rapidly in play, the economic activity became the core activity. And I may be, traumatized by having run Traveler for accounting majors and thus had to start an interstellar war to crash the currency markets. But that is very much a standard lobe of Traveler play, was playing with economics. And I think that means that when you're designing your rules, you either have to say economics are going to be only a story generator or only an excuse. And that's why our economics rules can remain as barely existent as they are in, say, Dungeons and Dragons, or they may be a robust part of gameplay, in which case you need to head in the Traveler GURPS sort of direction.
Right.
And I guess
you end up with the real breaking point when you are only halfway between those things. The
exactly, and
joke
that's
we were
where
making
early
before we
traveler
started.
was, for example.
Yeah, the joke we were making before we started is that in D&D, a gold piece is a fraction of a magic item.
Yeah.
That is what its value is, because for all that 5e is actually this fantastic game of multiple currencies and economies and balancing and engines and stuff, its actual money system is like, what are you using the money for?
Magic items.
Magic items.
Yeah.
Now, the other two fun ways you can look at it is a portion of a vassal, because there is a direct hit point to gold piece ratio based on an infinite number of healing potions that can be produced. And there's also a gold piece is a fraction of a castle, which is accurate in first and second edition.
Yep, and
we're talking about 5e now.
But 5e,
Yeah.
I mean, and 5e's got things like the Acquisitions Incorporated stuff, which is based on making your adventuring more businessy, which is, if that's your jam, it's super, super fun. But the point that comes of this is, if you are running a system that's got money in it, what are the bounds on it? What's going to keep that under control? Because otherwise, you basically, if you've got nothing to spend it on and an infinite number of dungeons to loot, you're going to ultimately have all the money, and it's not going to make any sense.
Certainly all the liquidity.
Yeah, the liquidity. Yeah, so just to go back to what Ken was talking about in game design, and I had mentioned incentives and risk, going back to the cave of near certain death, right? The incentive to making it fun, to making something called the cave of near certain death fun, is that there's a promise of a really amazing fight in there. I think getting the thing at the end is a bonus, but what we really want is that fun, that journey, that humongous fight. So like players, they want to balance that risk. They want the risk to be high enough that it's really exciting and they feel like that they are risking something, and uncertainty about what the outcome is. They also want the incentive to be able to go in and get something that's really cool and be incentivized to go and have that fight. So when we're talking about, that's like straight up balanced engines and balanced rules engines, right? So yeah, and there's a bunch of games that have really nice balanced rules engines. I think Blades, has a really nice one. Both in like a macro point with the gangs and how they balance the resources, and then internally to the group and how the group works and passes around the incentives for them to work together.
And explicitly abstracts the economics. I mean, coin is an abstract currency for a good reason.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time working with the Gumshoe engine, trying to make the trade-offs of sorcery fun, to make it awful, right? To give it a bunch of risk. It was in it using it, but there's an incentive to actually put it into play, is that it's very colorful and it can be very powerful. So, but you could also like completely eat your character. So there's risk to incentive, and thinking about how we balance these things is an engine that makes sort of game design really go. And then there's the inside of it where like there's money involved and I want to steal things. Like if I could, I'm just going to natter on about Eversync for a minute. Right.
Please do. I was going to ask you if you didn't. So
yeah. So so I like put the salt flats into Eversync. I stole Venice's salt flats in Eversync, and it's basically a hook there for me. It's a selfish thing to come back and be able to write some adventures, because you start thinking about, okay, and inside the game, because the game has rules to be able to do this social combat, so that it doesn't all have to be taking your sword and hitting a thing. Right? It can be like political fight, and there's rules in there for political infighting and gang infighting and all that. You start to think, okay, what if I decide that all of a sudden whoever was controlling the salt flats doesn't have control over it anymore? Right? So now we've got an incentive. Somebody needs to control them because there's such a huge financial engine to the city, and they have such political clout in the city. Plus, there's a bunch of risk, which is everybody's going to be diving for it at once. And what does that actually look like as a machine? And there's enough machinery in there to work it through. And then there's different factions and different gangs. So you start thinking about, okay, from the incentive to be able to go do it from a game design point of view. Okay, there's an incentive to control this thing. Plus, there's an incentive outside of the game to go and want the players to control this thing, because they're going to have fun social combat. And then maybe you decide who actually controls it is like a mine-eating fungus or something, and it eats everybody's brains who try to control the salt flats because it's ever sink, and that's what happens. Or it's haunted by horrible ghosts from beyond time, or it's controlled by the salt god who's decided to possess everybody who tries to control it, or something cool like that. But so we could go in a bunch of different directions.
Within Eversync, how did you, and if you said we left it abstract, that's an answer, but I suspect it's not the answer. How did you handle differing levels of wealth within the party, and characters who get rich as a result of a sudden stroke of luck?
Yeah,
or because the notion of a merchant prince or a rich thief lord or something like that is core to the swords and sorcery genre.
Right.
How did you integrate that financial violence into play, or the notions of those sorts of things? How did you gamify being richer than the guy next to you?
You're gonna love this. I don't remember how the wealth rules work in detail.
Oh God, they're so good. They're so good.
Rob, can you tell us how good Emily is?
Okay.
I wrote them. Kevin wrote them, so I'm not gonna make you shout out.
So these are genuinely genius.
And we're not here about Kevin. This is about you. Rob, can you tell us how great Emily is?
Absolutely, and I will also throw in one other thing that's fantastic about Eversync is that it has the best tension in a setting I've seen between power and money.
That is me.
That's totally you. So in Eversync is brilliant in that the wealth rules are about the effect of wealth, not about the acquisition of wealth, because the general idea is if you're Conan, you are going to start some adventures with rubies spilling out of your hands as you are wandering in, wrapped in gold and silks. And certain adventures, you're going to start just scraping the bottom of the barrel. And you just make a decision at the start of play where you are on that spectrum. And it's represented in effectively a balanced stat, which if you're not worrying about it, you're just, how broke or well off you are isn't really getting into play. Then it's at 0, is in the middle, which I think technically it's at 3 because I think it's a 1 to 5. And you don't worry about it. But if you go up or down, what it effectively does is it creates a pool, which is what skills are for all intents and purposes with this, and what are also social connections, which you can use to do all kinds of things, but which also generate trouble according to what it is. So if you come in and you are super rich, you are Conan with all the money in the world, you will have the level 2 wealthy pool in effect. And that will do 2 things. One, you can use it to help on rolls where having a bunch of money is going to help. Great, go nuts. And there is an existing rule system that it taps into that keeps it reasonably under control. It's balanced, it's not really an issue. But you also are going to have problems and consequences that are tied to that, which is to say some people really hate rich people. And rich people draw a lot of attention.
Rob.
I know, shocking. But by the same token, if you go super poor,
I personally love rich people. I just want to put that out there.
Yes.
So rich people, if you're watching,
give Ken money.
Big thumbs up.
Right there.
But similarly, if you're the poor, it's the dramatic version of poor. I mean, it's the dramatic Conan version of poor, which is, you're in the gutters and in the streets, so it's much easier to interact with lower class people. And so, like, if you've got to fence some goods, but you're running around with high level money, that is going to drive a very different kind of play than if you're running around with low level money. It is a small, brilliant mechanic, like so many things in Swords of the Serpentine.
Right. We spend a lot of time thinking about the faction balancing, right? Because if you're going to have an economic system with a social combat and a wealth mechanic, you wanted to have balanced factions. So we've old money and new money and common money and thieves guilds, and the watch is its own thing. So it's literally we can have like cop incentives to be able to stop anything that's bad. It's the commons, the government, the church. So all these different people that are all interacting together in a big soup that we consider to be a society, and they're all working in this economic system. And then we have a gaming system in between, which allows us to balance between those things so that we can think about, stories between everything from I need to go find this street sorcerer to, it's like we're going to go battle over the control of the salt flats of Eversync, which I would love to spend some time on.
I would like to give a call out for another game which does economics to a ridiculously fantastic degree. Red Markets.
I've never
Okay.
played it.
So, basic principle behind Red Markets is, so we had a zombie apocalypse, but it was unevenly distributed. So there are some strongholds that are safe from the zombie apocalypse functionally. And the rich people get to live in those nice, safe buildings, those nice, safe sanctuaries. Everyone else effectively goes dumpster diving through zombie apocalypse land, taking life insurance policies, proof of zombies' heads as proof of death, bringing back zombie grandma because some rich CEO wants their grandmother back for an experimental treatment. You name it. So you're sent out to go and effectively harvest financial resources of various kinds from zombies. Now, the reason why this is brilliant is because you have to pay for things like life insurance, medical transport emergencies, upkeep for your gear. So it's all about the poverty cycle.
Interesting.
So going out on a job is I am going to use up this much of my gun, this much of my it's going to affect my life survival risks to this extent, so I'm going to have to invest this amount in my medical care. I'm not going to pay for that special level that gets a helicopter heli evac if I'm dying. So if they'll have to haul me out in a wheelbarrow because I don't have the money for that.
And this comes back to the traveler thing. This is the classic Oregon Trail model, for lack of a better thing. There is a mode of play where putting together a spreadsheet and balancing costs can just be super fun for a certain kind of player. I will call out, oh God, you have to be careful with that because those are the most dangerous players on the planet.
Yeah.
And if you have not made the system incredibly robustly unfair, they will find a way to break it and bankrupt your entire economy.
I mean, this has healthcare and health insurance in a post-apocalyptic zombie world. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that. It's fine.
Yep.
So
It
that's
is sufficiently made.
all kinds of questions in my head. like how do you actually build actuarial tables around the zombie apocalypse? And who actually prices all the things that could possibly happen to you in the zombie apocalypse? And it's
I've got an answer for you. It's Vegas, baby.
Oh, it's Vegas.
It's not actuarials. It's the house.
So here's the other thing.
Oh, wait, this is more interesting.
Yeah.
So
the thing is obviously that the house is the model until actuarial science catches up.
Sure.
That's how it works. I mean, life insurance before probably 1930 was Vegas, essentially.
Essentially, yeah.
And that's why you could, make money as a serial killer back in the good old days. But the new,
he likes rich people.
But the new systems come in, and it's about information. And so you could argue that in the 50 years in the future of red markets, they'll have an actuarial system that actually can handle all the variables of zombie apocalypse, because you'll have a big enough database that you can start having statistically valid prices. Right?
So
we're doing data science in the zombie apocalypse.
Yes.
Because there are areas that are not zombie apocalyptic. The rich people houses, whatever area that is. I don't know, because I don't know the world.
We were earlier making the statement that money is just information, and so data science and data transmission speeds both matter hugely for our money purposes.
Yes, prices are just information. But wait a second. I have this crazy idea about running that game with a group of people that do nothing but raid old rich people like neighborhoods to take over their houses to build data centers.
There you go.
Right.
So you break into like the big what is it? It's the fiber optic switching
Yeah.
place in Memphis or Omaha or wherever it is. One of those where all the fiber optic cables come down so they can cross the Mississippi.
There you go. You form the group of adventurers who's not going out and gathering things; they're just watching other adventurers die so you can get better actuarial tables.
That's right.
Yes, adventurers that go into oh God, running the wire.
Yes.
Yes.
Not the TV, The Wire, which is also great, but the great Chicago outfit scam, The Wire.
Yes.
Because you have advanced information that your clients don't, you're able to manipulate the odds.
Oh crap!
And say that there's some zombie killing adventurer who's out there doing better than he should be. He's really good. He's an Ash or somebody. Well, in order to protect your back end, you've got to kill him.
Oh my God, this is fantastic.
And just gun him down on the street.
Wait, who wrote this game? Because I think we have a supplement. I think
Caleb Stokes.
Yep.
All right.
And this, by the way, is all the stuff
games.
that should be going. This is all the stuff that should be going into every cyberpunk game you play.
I want to write a cyberpunk game.
If you do a cyberpunk game that is not abusing fintech for these purposes, then you are missing out on what is cyberpunk these days.
Now, there is one thing you need to know in addition to this that sweetens the pie.
What?
Society is slowly reclaiming Zombieland.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why people are going out to get land deeds and proof of death for inheritance rules, so that when we reclaim fallen Pittsburgh, now I own fallen Pittsburgh.
I don't want to own Pittsburgh.
Oh, that is such an amazing suckers game.
Yeah, but.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, that's it. There's a lot of. I can sell you a bridge. No, seriously, I'll sell you the Golden Gate Bridge.
It's got maintenance fees. Too much upkeep.
It's a mugs game.
Yeah, no, it's too much investment there. No, pass.
Yep.
All right. With the 15-minute warning, we got a couple of questions in the backlog, and they're actually pretty interesting ones. So one of them is, what
we have a moderator.
I know, but I happen to have it open.
Okay, that's fair.
What are the panelists' thoughts about systems that use abstract levels of resources versus currency systems?
Systems that use
versus like actual money.
Systems that use abstract resources are telling you they don't want to be clotheslined by a bunch of accounting majors, right? I mean, the notion of an abstract system is this is not where play happens. Play happens somewhere else.
Yep.
I mean, play always happens where the game is most granular. That's the most finely defined.
Yeah,
that's why D&D is about combat, and there's other stuff.
I respect
a game with an actual price value, even a game like D&D, as Emily has demonstrated time and again, can be made to be about that, and then that's either a good thing or a terrible thing, depending on how many finance majors you have in your game group, I guess.
I respectfully disagree, just on the grounds that granularity can be granularity in statistical outcomes, and then it just jumps into a stats game. So I'm specifically thinking of Torchbearer, where you are trying to bring up your wealth stat, and your ability to increase your wealth stat increases the higher amount your wealth stat is.
Sure.
But going from 0 to 1 is nightmarish, because you need to effectively artificially boost your wealth by bringing in a whole bunch of treasure. So the chances of succeeding on various things that will improve your financial position and avoid incurring additional debt is based on
the game
matter.
Yes, the game in Torchbearer is not a financial game.
Right.
Your wealth stat is just your basically your experience level.
It's nice color on it.
Yeah, right. And you can't monetize it or even divide it up as much as you can experience points, because Luke is saying the game is no more about wealth than D&D is about level. D&D is about fighting. Torchbearer is about misery, and in a good way. I mean, I love Luke and I love Torchbearer, but the game is about that specific expression of immiseration, in terms of not even combat, just the awful life experience of being in a dungeon. So that's not what we're talking about, Jason. We're talking about
misery and encumbrance.
to what extent play happens around that value. And with an abstracted wealth system, you're either doing it as a sort of, like credit rating in Call of Cthulhu. It's it's an engine for role playing and for setting up one or another kind of story, but it isn't really part of the core activity of the game. I think Eversync and Swords of the Serpentine is kind of in the middle space, where because you've got economic questions with the factions and their balancings is a core part of play, your wealth stat is a little more important and a little more relevant to that. But still, that's not the fundamental activity necessarily, as I understand it, right?
No, it's not. No, it's storytelling is the fundamental activity.
And then you get down to something like Traveler or many, many, many GURPS games, or in theory, any game that just has dollars and cents as its money value, or some other discrete unit of coinage. And that game, yes, absolutely can be suddenly about futures trades and derivatives and tranches and all the other ridiculous words we were throwing around earlier in the frighten the audience portion of this panel.
I have like pleasant memories of Rollmaster games where like players were doing terrible things for just 2 copper, but that was very specific to that sort of game. And I think every game needs to figure out roughly what order of magnitude it cares about.
Yeah.
And whether that is a substance level or a year's income, either one works. But you have to, if that decision is made, then that will tell you what you need to do with your money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, then one more.
Pick a good one.
What are some good ways to break through player GM assumptions we've developed living in contemporary systems, capitalist economies, instant communications, extremely fast shipping, market research, etc.?
It's interesting how to break through player assumptions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to say to some extent we explicitly don't want to break them all, because like even D&D depends on sort of more modern assumptions. Just look at D&D's handling of currency, because nobody wants to do a currency simulator. So
they certainly don't want to do a medieval currency simulator.
Exactly.
No, oh my God, no. I don't know. I think I want to accept the fact that at the end of the day, games are about fun, right? So we're here to make fun. And if there's a certain set of modern assumptions that are built into the game that either can be used as a shortcut or a shorthand or make the game easier to just get to the story part of the game, which is the important part, then I don't think that it's all that important to disavow players of some of the modern conveniences.
The parallel would be with healing rules, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if any of us were shot or stabbed, we would be in the hospital for weeks, maybe, and then we'd be in physical therapy for months. That's just what happens if you're legitimately shot or stabbed. But that's horribly dull, uninteresting gameplay. It's a counter incentive to doing anything fun. So healing rules, even in the most realistic games, are ridiculously fast and ridiculously consequence-free.
Yep.
I mean, with the barracks, I mean, I guess claw law is the excuse, but even then, it's the damage that's the fun part. The healing is still up. Slap a potion on it, you're good as new tomorrow. And even in very, very modern, squinty-eyed, robust games, healing is desperately accelerated, and because no one wants to play realistic wounding. Similarly, no one wants to play realistic pricing, and the fun, certainly again, medieval pricing, and because the notion that you can't make any economic transaction until you're related to the person you're transacting it with, which is the core assumption until about 1800 everywhere in the world. You can't do that in a game. In a game, you have to be hobos who can leave town ahead of your murder warrant.
Right. I mean, having this default assumption of something reasonably stable and boring is what allows you to introduce exceptions.
Yeah.
So
and make things fun.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to introduce some place in your setting that doesn't accept currency and uses one of the pre-currency modes of trade, because those are fun to read about, and you thought it was really neat to have people putting things on blankets and doing non-communication trade, do it. You can totally have it there. But unless that is what your game is about, those things are more useful as exceptions.
Yeah, that's an adventure.
I mean,
that's
I
not
would love,
Brain
Yeah.
World.
yeah,
That's correct.
I would love I need to get a MacGuffin. I have to get it through the people that you can only contact through this merchant network that you can only trade with if you are related to them. So now I have to woo a member of this merchant guild so I can get into the extended family so I can get the MacGuffin. That is
customs
story.
checks rules. You do not want to have to do a customs check every time you go into a city.
That's
Except
right.
that one time when you're smuggling in the golden bust of the Empress.
I mean, again,
Yeah.
the one adventure that's
Yeah.
about marrying the idiot cousin of the trading family is fun.
Yep.
But if you have to marry an idiot cousin or find a
That's
family
right.
connection every time you come back to town, that's
Not
stupid
fun.
and boring, and no one
Yeah.
likes it.
Yeah,
Um,
here's the overwhelming thing. Don't design boring things into your game.
There you go.
Yep.
The
If
first
it's-
rule.
If it's boring, cut it, right?
Right.
And
Or abstract it.
or abstract it. But just don't put it into your game. Just don't. It's
Yeah.
about fun.
That said, if you want to bring in, emphasize that it's not a modern world with overnight Amazon free shipping, you can do things such as the seasonality of food. I'm sorry, we don't have any more green vegetables. It's winter. Come back in 6 months. I'm sorry, getting this spice. I mean, only a noble can get this spice. We need to, if you find a bag of cumin, that is better than gold.
The one thing I will say is, if you love your maps and you love your D&D, because and I'm totally in that space, there is a type of map that you can sometimes find. You can find examples of pretty easily by Googling. Usually England is at the middle of them, that are color-coded by how long it takes to get places.
Yep.
That is an exercise that is well worth doing on whatever your D&D map is, and recognize that there are caveats in flight and ways to get around it.
Mention door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But knowing how far away things are in distance is not the same thing as knowing how far away they are in time.
Mhm.
And if you do a time map of your setting, a whole lot of things will sort of logically snap into place that you maybe hadn't thought about before.
And of course, you have to keep in mind that time is different on water or land.
Yep.
As late as 1750, it took longer to get from London to Edinburgh by land than it took to get from London to Cape Town by sea.
Yep.
So distance apart is a different number.
Very much so.
Obviously, you'd get on a boat and get to Edinburgh much faster, but if you're on land, you're just screwed.
Yeah. So
And-
don't travel on land. That's what you
Well, kids.
I mean, or you take the other solution and just do the Eberron solution. Eberron is chock-a-block full of cool
Magic
setting
trains.
elements that are just
Yep.
excuses for modern convenience.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Hellenistic,
to be fair, you can also
Hellenistica
have Romans.
has a similar assumption. What?
You can also have Romans.
Sure.
We have an empire that builds roads. This changes the
Done.
variables, and now you've got an old empire.
Yeah.
There were
So,
Roman roads that led all the way north, and it still took that long.
Yep.
That's fair.
Just
So
physically
who are
impossible
you
to do
people
it until
again,
you
and how
have
can we hunt
horse
you
relays
down
every
All right.
20 miles.
and give
Okay,
you money?
okay,
Okay,
yes.
Mickey's throwing the "we should say who we are" flag for wrapping up.
All right. Who am I?
That's M. She's awesome. You should read her Dungeonomics column in
I'm Critical Hit.
up on Critical Hits. I posted the link in the chat, so it's there for scrollback.
What's your social media for where
Oh.
people can follow your every utterance and worship
You
you
don't
correctly?
want to do that. That's terrible.
You totally do. Her
Totally
Twitter's
do.
awesome.
I totally do.
Yeah, so I'm multiplexer on Twitter. So it's multiplexer at Twitter. So, and I've got a blog, which is projectmultiplexer.com, which I occasionally post a rant about.
And you can buy pre-orders of Swords of the Serpentine
thank you, guys.
even now on pelgrainpress.com.
But I don't even remember who I am.
Ken knows his business.
Yes. My first rodeo, for God's sake. I'm Kenneth Hite. I'm Kenneth Hite on Twitter and Kenneth Hite on Facebook. Follow my every social media utterance religiously, and you'll find out what I'm up to. Most recently, I'm in the process of writing, to the extent possible with Pandemic Brain, Hellenistica, my 5e setting set in the Good Parts version of the 3rd century BC. which, by the way, is the only time in pre-18th century history a cash economy actually functioned. So not an accident that I set things there. And working on some other stuff. Fall of Delta Green, my most recent role-playing game, also from Pelgrane Press, deals with the 1960s, but resources are abstracted, as they very well should be.
Yep.
I'm Rob Donoghue. I write so little these days that I don't just give away that it's hard to point out. I'm RDONOGHUE on Twitter. And I guess if I were to plug something, I would happily plug the Evil Hat Kickstarter for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, which is doing fantastically, but could be doing more fantastically with your interest. I can take no credit for anything in that book except for cheering enthusiastically as Fred showed me previews.
And I'm Jason Pitre, Genesis of Legend Publishing, at Genesis of Legend on Twitter. I just finished the Kickstarter for my game Sig City of Blades, which is Blades in the Dark set in a multiplanar fantasy setting, which has all sorts of fun trade stuff. And you can find that over at kickstarter.games, at least for the next month or so. So www.kickstarter.games.
I guess I should plug my podcast, Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff, where we talk about all manner of fun nonsense in exactly as much detail as you need for games, and no more, we promise. That's Ken and Robin Talk About Stuff.com or wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Basically, just look for any RPG podcast awards and you'll find a link to it.
Yeah, that's true.
Sweet of you to say.
It's a pretty good podcast. You guys should listen to it.
See, M said so. M said so.
And I'm going to plug Kevin. You follow Kevin. He's at Kevin Culp, right?
You follow Emily. You've basically got all the good part.
No, you should follow Kevin too.
They make a dynamic duo. Big thumbs up on both.
Yes, so does Batman and Robin. The one you follow is Batman.
Oh, God.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.